At 2:17 a.m., the marble corridors of Drake Preparatory Academy held their breath. A line of chalk slashed across a whiteboard, an impossible equation abandoned like a dare. Rafael Cortez, night janitor with a mop in one hand and a mind he kept hidden like contraband, paused and solved it in 5 patient moves. Somewhere above, a security monitor flickered, and billionaire owner Evelyn Drake leaned closer, realizing the man who cleaned her halls had just rewritten a problem her engineers couldn't.
Rafael Cortez moved like a ghost through the marble halls of Billionaire Academy. The lights dimmed after midnight, leaving only the soft hum of the vending machines and the occasional echo of his mop bucket wheels. He'd learned the rhythm of silence. When the hallways sighed, when the pipes in the chemistry lab hissed, when the custodial radio crackled from a distant corridor, he preferred it this way. The world was quieter at night. Quieter meant he could think. He pushed the mop down another stretch of hallway, passing the framed photographs of past graduating classes. Young faces grinning in their caps and gowns, eyes bright with futures already paved. He paused by one in particular, the class of 2008, when he himself had been a scholarship kid in another city, another life. Back then, he dreamed of being a teacher, or maybe an engineer, but dreams didn't pay hospital bills. He wrung out the mop, sighing as the bucket's handle squeaked. His hands were cracked, calloused, older than his 38 years suggested. At home, Sophia would be asleep by now, or pretending to be. His daughter had inherited his stubbornness. 9 years old, sharp-eyed and fragile as glass, Sophia had a heart condition that made every winter dangerous. The upcoming surgery in April could change everything, but the cost was higher than he'd ever imagined. That's why he worked nights here, mornings at the car wash, and weekends fixing air conditioners. Every shift, every dollar, built a fragile bridge toward that surgery date circled on the family calendar in red marker. He wasn't supposed to use the classrooms, but rules blurred after 2 in the morning, when the school felt more like a forgotten museum than a living institution. Sometimes, when the hallways were clean and the waxed floors gleamed, he'd slip into room 3B, the math classroom, and study the chalkboard. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about remembering who he used to be. The teacher, Mr. Hanley, left equations scrawled across the board that Raphael couldn't resist solving. Complex sequences, geometric proofs, the kind that required quiet persistence. His mind would unfold, one number at a time, as if no years had passed since he last sat in a real classroom. Tonight, he found a new one waiting, a tangled series of differential equations. A note beside it read, "Challenge for the advanced class, due Monday." Raphael smiled faintly. "Challenge accepted," he whispered to no one. He picked up a piece of chalk. The motion felt natural, like an old rhythm remembered by the body before the mind caught up. His handwriting, neat and angled, filled the right half of the board as he worked line by line. His mind became a calm sea. Numbers turned into stories, steps into dialogue. He didn't notice the security camera blinking above the door. By the time the clock struck 3, the equation stood solved, neat and symmetrical. Raphael looked at it for a long moment, satisfaction quietly blooming in his chest. He erased his initials from the corner, habit, then returned the chalk, washed his hands, and moved on. When dawnlight began to spill through the windows, Raphael clocked out. He walked home along the narrow sidewalks of Edgewater Avenue, his jacket zipped to his chin, the cold biting through the thin fabric. The sunrise painted the rooftops gold. In his backpack, he carried a stack of half-torn textbooks that teachers had thrown away. Math, physics, even an old literature anthology. At the apartment, he slipped inside quietly. Sophia was awake now, sitting up with a blanket around her shoulders, pencil in hand. "Papa, you're late," she said, her voice small but teasing. "I stopped to fight with a mop. The mop won." She laughed, then coughed lightly. He poured her some warm milk and set it beside her. "What are we studying today?" she asked eagerly. He opened one of the rescued books and flipped to a chapter on geometry. Triangles, the world's sharpest friends. She giggled as he sat beside her, pointing at the diagrams. For an hour, the world outside their one-room apartment vanished. She loved when he explained things. He made numbers sound like stories and formulas like puzzles waiting to be solved. When she yawned, he closed the book. That's enough brilliance for one morning. He leaned against him. You should be a teacher, Papa. He smiled, a little wistful. Maybe in another life. That same morning, across the city, Billionaire Academy's founder and owner, Edward Langford, was reviewing a report in his glass-walled office. A middle-aged billionaire with an engineer's curiosity and an investor's patience, Langford rarely missed anomalies in his institution. "Who's been in the math wing after hours?" he asked, scrolling through the footage on his tablet. His assistant frowned. "Only the janitorial staff, Rafael Cortez, night shift, no incidents reported." Langford zoomed in on the playback. On the screen, a man in a blue uniform stood before the chalkboard, chalk in hand, solving a problem that Langford himself had posed to the faculty weeks ago, a theoretical equation his research team hadn't cracked. "Pause that there," Langford said. The assistant stopped the video. "Do you know who this man is?" "Just the janitor, sir." Langford studied the still image, Raphael's calm posture, his precise handwriting, the way his eyes lingered on the board. He felt something stir. Curiosity. Respect. Maybe even awe. "Get me his file," Langford said quietly, "and tell Mr. Hanley to leave that problem on the board a few more nights." Meanwhile, Raphael walked Sophia to school, her small hand clutching his. The morning wind was sharp, but her laughter carried warmth. "You'll be late for work, Papa," she said, glancing at the bus stop ahead. "I'm always late," he replied with a grin, "but I always get there." He watched her run toward the school gates, her backpack bouncing. Every time she turned to wave, his heart felt heavier and lighter at once. He boarded the bus to his next shift, the car wash, unaware that somewhere, in a glass office overlooking the city, a billionaire had just pressed pause on his life's invisibility. Langford sat back in his chair, the image of the janitor frozen on screen. Rafael Cortez. Let's see what else you can solve. And for the first time in years, the man who cleaned the floors of Billionaire Academy was about to be noticed for something far brighter than polish or shine.
Raphael had no idea that his midnight habit had drawn attention. The next few nights passed as usual, quiet, meticulous, exhausting. He'd grown used to the rhythm: mop, polish, empty bins, sweep, and then, when the world stopped looking his way, slip into room 3B for a few stolen minutes of thought. But on Thursday night, something felt different. The math problem on the board had changed again. Another complex equation, this time involving probability and geometric series, the kind usually reserved for graduate students, not high schoolers. He studied it silently, brow furrowed. "Mr. Hanley's students must be geniuses," he muttered. But the curiosity won. He reached for the chalk. As the soft white dust coated his fingers, he worked methodically, dividing, rearranging, testing. It took him almost 40 minutes to spot the elegant trick in the sequence. By the end, the board was full, his handwriting neat and calm, the solution unfolding like music. He left, as always, before the morning crew arrived. That same dawn, Langford sat in his office again, coffee cooling beside him. On his tablet, the newest recording showed Raphael entering, solving the second problem, erasing nothing, then quietly walking away. Langford leaned back. "Twice isn't luck," he murmured. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Bring Mr. Cortez to me tomorrow morning. No alarm, no fuss. Tell him I want to discuss a facilities matter." The next morning, Raphael arrived for his shift at the car wash, his hands still aching from the previous night. Around noon, his phone buzzed, a rare occurrence. The screen displayed Billionaire Academy Administration. He hesitated before answering. "Mr. Cortez?" came a calm, professional voice. "This is Miss Green, assistant to Mr. Langford. He'd like to meet you tomorrow morning regarding your work at the academy." "My work?" "Yes, sir. He asked personally." Raphael's stomach tightened. "Did something happen?" "I'm not at liberty to say," Ms. Green replied politely. "He just wants a short meeting in his office, 10 a.m. When the line went dead, Raphael stared at the phone, heart pounding. He'd always kept his head down, done his job, stayed invisible. What could a billionaire want with him? That night, he worked more carefully than ever, double-checking every task. But curiosity gnawed at him. By the time he reached room 3B, there was another equation waiting, and beneath it a note in elegant handwriting. "If you solve this one, don't erase your name. L.E." Raphael froze. He knew those initials. Edward Langford. He stared at the board for a long moment, feeling a strange mix of pride and fear. Then slowly, he picked up the chalk. This problem was different, layered, conceptual, almost playful. It demanded not just logic, but creativity. As he worked, he found himself smiling despite his nerves. Whoever had written it understood not just numbers, but beauty. When he finished, the board glowed with clarity, a perfectly reasoned solution. For the first time, he did as asked. At the bottom corner, he wrote, R. Cortez. The next morning, he wore his cleanest shirt and borrowed jacket, both slightly frayed but pressed with care. Sophia noticed as he prepared to leave. "You look fancy, Papa." "Important meeting," he said with mock seriousness. "Maybe they'll give me a gold mop." She giggled, hugging him before he left. At Billionaire, the administrative offices smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee, a world away from the bleach and wax of the lower floors. The receptionist led him to a glass elevator that opened into a panoramic view of the campus. Edward Langford's office was minimalist, floor-to-ceiling windows, a single desk, and walls lined with framed patents. Langford himself stood near the window, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that saw more than they revealed. "Mr. Cortez," he said warmly, extending a hand. "I thank you for coming." "Of course, sir. Is there something wrong with the cleaning schedule?" Langford smiled faintly. "Not exactly." He turned his tablet toward him. "I'd like to ask about this." The screen played a clip. Raphael alone in room 3B, chalk in hand, the equation, the solution, the signature. Raphael froze. I can explain." "No need," Langford interrupted gently. "You're quite good. In fact, you solved 3 problems that my senior analysts couldn't." Raphael blinked, speechless. "Sir, I didn't mean to—" Langford raised a hand. "You didn't do anything wrong. You did something remarkable." He studied him for a moment. "Where did you learn mathematics like that?" Raphael hesitated. "I studied engineering back home, before Sophia was born. I had to drop out after, well, life changed." Langford nodded, not pressing. "And yet you still think like a mathematician." A long silence hung between them. Finally, Langford said, "I have a proposition. I run a foundation connected to the academy. We sponsor research, mentorships, community projects. I'd like you to assist one of my teams, part-time, on top of your janitorial work. Nothing risky, just helping us solve problems." Raphael stared, stunned. "Me?" "Yes, you." Langford's tone softened. "I don't believe talent should go unnoticed, Mr. Cortez, even if it's found in a janitor's uniform." Raphael's throat tightened. "Sir, I wouldn't want to risk my job." "You won't," Langford said firmly. "This isn't charity. It's opportunity. Think of it as a second shift for your mind." Raphael exhaled slowly. He could barely process it. "I'll do my best. I'm counting on it.
Langford replied with a small smile. "Come to the East Wing tomorrow night after your shift. I'll have someone waiting." That evening, back in the apartment, Sophia was drawing by the window when he walked in. "How was your meeting, Papa?" He knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. "Strange," he said softly. "Good strange." "Did you get the gold mop?" she teased. "Better," he said, eyes warm. "I got another chance." He didn't tell her everything, not yet. But as she fell asleep, he sat by her bedside, staring at the city lights outside. For the first time in years, the world seemed wider again. At Bellmere, Edward Langford looked out over the same skyline from his penthouse office. On his desk, Raphael's handwritten equations lay neatly copied, a quiet testament to hidden brilliance. Langford smiled to himself. "Let's see what you can do with the real challenge, Mr. Cortez." The city hummed below, unaware that somewhere between marble floors and chalk dust, a janitor's destiny had just shifted, not by chance, but by the precision of numbers and the quiet courage to keep learning.
The next night, the janitor's closet felt smaller than usual. Raphael changed into his uniform, folded his jacket carefully, and stared at his reflection in the dented metal mirror. The same weary face looked back, brown eyes lined with sleepless nights, hair beginning to silver at the edges, hands strong but trembling slightly. He didn't look like a man who belonged anywhere near the East Wing, yet Mr. Langford had been clear. "Come to the East Wing after your shift. Someone will be waiting." By the time midnight struck, he'd cleaned the gymnasium floors twice over just to burn off nerves. When he finally pushed his cart toward the East Wing, his heart pounded as if he were sneaking into forbidden ground. The East Wing was different from the rest of Bellmere. Quiet, carpeted, the air faintly scented with cedar and ozone from high-tech machines. Behind one glass door glowed a small lab. Sleek computers, mathematical graphs streaming across screens, whiteboards filled with equations. A woman looked up as he entered. She was around his age, sharp-featured, with a streak of silver in her dark hair, and glasses that magnified intelligent, assessing eyes. "You must be Mr. Cortez," she said, standing. "I'm Dr. Meena Patel. Mr. Langford told me you'd be joining us." "Joining?" Raphael repeated, hesitant. She smiled faintly. "He didn't tell you much, did he?" "Typical. He said you've got a good mathematical instinct. We'll see about that." Raphael swallowed. "I'm just a janitor." "Not tonight," she said, motioning to a whiteboard. "Tonight, you're a collaborator." For the next 2 hours, Raphael found himself immersed in a world he thought he'd lost forever. Meena explained the project, an optimization model for energy-efficient building systems. The equations sprawled across the board like constellations. She handed him a marker. "If you were to minimize these losses, where would you start?" He froze, staring at the formula. His mind hesitated. Then, like an old...
The next night, the janitor's closet felt smaller than usual. Raphael changed into his uniform, folded his jacket carefully, and stared at his reflection in the dented metal mirror. The same weary face looked back, brown eyes lined with sleepless nights, hair beginning to silver at the edges, hands strong but trembling slightly. He didn't look like a man who belonged anywhere near the East Wing, yet Mr. Langford had been clear. "Come to the East Wing after your shift. Someone will be waiting." By the time midnight struck, he'd cleaned the gymnasium floors twice over just to burn off nerves. When he finally pushed his cart toward the East Wing, his heart pounded as if he were sneaking into forbidden ground. The East Wing was different from the rest of Bellmere. Quiet, carpeted, the air faintly scented with cedar and ozone from high-tech machines. Behind one glass door glowed a small lab, sleek computers, mathematical graphs streaming across screens, whiteboards filled with equations. A woman looked up as he entered. She was around his age, sharp-featured, with a streak of silver in her dark hair and glasses that magnified intelligent, assessing eyes. "You must be Mr. Cortez," she said, standing. "I'm Dr. Meena Patel. Mr. Langford told me you'd be joining us. Joining? Raphael repeated, hesitant. She smiled faintly. He didn't tell you much, did he? Typical. He said you've got a good mathematical instinct. We'll see about that. Raphael swallowed. I'm just a janitor. Not tonight, she said, motioning to a whiteboard. Tonight, you're a collaborator. For the next 2 hours, Raphael found himself immersed in a world he thought he'd lost forever. Mina explained the project, an optimization model for energy-efficient building systems. The equations sprawled across the board like constellations. She handed him a marker. If you were to minimize these losses, where would you start? He froze, staring at the formula. His mind hesitated, then, like an old engine kicking to life, began to move. Slowly, carefully, he circled a variable. Here, you're treating it like a fixed coefficient, but it should be dynamic, a function of temperature, not time. Mina blinked. That's not how we modeled it. Try it, he murmured. It compensates for the spike at dawn. She typed quickly, running the simulation. When the results flashed on screen, a 12% improvement, she turned toward him, eyebrows raised. That's impressive, she said softly. You saw that in 30 seconds. He smiled awkwardly. I clean faster than I think. She laughed. You think faster than most of my grad students. For the next hour, they traded ideas, equations and logic tumbling between them like shared language rediscovered. Mina's skepticism melted into respect, then quiet fascination. Finally, she leaned back, studying him. You really shouldn't be mopping floors. He looked down, embarrassed. I need the job, my daughter's surgery. Her face softened. I see. Langford didn't mention that. Raphael shrugged. It's all right. I don't need anyone's pity. Pity? Mina shook her head. You've got something most people spend a lifetime trying to find. Purpose. Her words lingered as he packed up his things. By dawn, he returned home exhausted but exhilarated. Sophia was already awake, coloring on the kitchen floor. Papa, you're smiling, she said suspiciously. Am I? He knelt beside her. Must be the mop again. It told me a joke. She giggled. What joke? He tapped her nose gently. That I might be smarter than it thinks? She tilted her head, sensing more behind the words. Did something good happen? He nodded slowly. Maybe something very good. Over the next week, Raphael's world doubled. By day and early evening, he scrubbed and polished like always. But when the school emptied and the clocks passed midnight, he entered the East Wing, where numbers danced, screens glowed, and for a few hours he was more than a man pushing a mop. Mina grew to rely on him. She'd toss equations at him like riddles, grin when he solved them, and occasionally challenge him to explain his reasoning out loud. It's not just what you know, it's how you see. He began to notice how the small things in his custodial work mirrored the mathematics he loved. Balance, order, efficiency. A bucket's tilt, the rhythm of sweeping, even the way he arranged his tools. Patterns everywhere. But one night, as he left the lab, he passed a group of senior teachers whispering near the lounge. Saw him coming out of the East Wing again. The janitor, what business does he have there? Langford's pet project, apparently. Ridiculous. Their laughter was low and mean. Raphael kept walking, pretending not to hear them, but the words stung. He'd lived most of his life invisible. Now visibility burned. The next evening, when he arrived at the lab, Mina noticed his silence. You all right? He shrugged. Some people think I don't belong here. She crossed her arms. And do you? He looked up. I don't know. Maybe I'm just borrowing space that isn't mine. Raphael, she said firmly, if you've earned your place with your mind, it's yours. The only people who will question that are the ones afraid of losing theirs. He stared at her, the quiet conviction in her tone disarming him. You sound like a teacher, she said softly. I used to be one, before I learned some schools don't know what genius looks like unless it comes in a blazer. They shared a long, understanding silence. Then she grinned. Now stop doubting yourself. Langford's coming by tomorrow to see our progress, and I'd like you there. Me? Presenting? You're half the reason it works.
The next few weeks turned Billionaire Academy into a quiet battlefield of whispers and wonder. By day, Raphael still pushed his mop and changed light bulbs, though more and more staff noticed he now disappeared into the east wing at night. Some said Langford had lost his mind. Others claimed the janitor was some sort of prodigy in disguise. Raphael ignored them all. He had no time for gossip. Between double shifts, study, and the steady countdown to Sophia's surgery, every second mattered. But the world rarely lets a secret stay kind for long. On a crisp Wednesday evening, Raphael arrived at the lab to find Mina pacing beside a set of graphs on the screen. "We're ready for the test run," she said. "Langford wants us to present the model at the sustainability conference next week." Raphael's eyes widened. "Us? I thought—" "You're the co-designer," she interrupted. "I told him so." He shook his head. "I can't speak at a conference. I'm not— Not what? Qualified? Dignified? Wearing a tie?" She crossed her arms. "You built half of this system, Raphael. If you don't stand beside it, you're erasing yourself again." Her words struck deep. He'd spent years erasing himself, his name from chalkboards, his ideas from conversations, his hopes from the mirror. He met her gaze. "All right, I'll do it." Mina smiled, satisfied. "Good. Then let's make sure it's perfect." The following days blurred into long nights. Equations covered every board. Charts printed, simulations rechecked, numbers balanced like tightropes. Mina handled the presentation slides. Raphael refined the optimization code, his logic sharp and tireless. Somewhere in the chaos, an unlikely friendship deepened. Mina brought him strong tea at 3 in the morning. He told her stories about Sophia's stubborn bravery and her love of riddles. She, in turn, spoke of her years teaching in Mumbai, how she'd left academia when politics outweighed purpose. They were two people from different worlds, bound by the same quiet hunger to make meaning out of numbers and to be seen for what they truly were. One night, as they reviewed data near dawn, Mina leaned back, rubbing her eyes. "You know, Langford's been bragging about you. He calls you the hidden equation." Raphael chuckled softly. "Hidden's right. Most days I'm invisible." "Not anymore," she said. He looked at her then, really looked. The tired but fierce intelligence in her eyes, the faint smile that made the sterile lab feel human. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me." She held her gaze. "You make it hard not to." The silence that followed was fragile, electric, a thread between two people who understood the ache of being underestimated. But before either could speak again, the door swung open. Langford stepped in. Crisp suit immaculate, expression unreadable. "Good evening, team." Mina straightened. "We're nearly ready, sir. Just final testing." "Excellent," he said. Then, turning to Raphael, "I've arranged for you to be listed as co-author on the research presentation. However—" Raphael's heart leapt, then paused. "However?" Langford hesitated, his voice lowering. "Some members of the board have expressed concern. They believe your background might distract from the credibility of the work." Mina's jaw tightened. "That's absurd." "I agree," Langford said calmly, "but perception is delicate. I'm navigating it carefully. For now, I need you both to stay focused." Raphael nodded slowly, though the sting landed deep. "Understood, sir." Langford's gaze softened. "Mr. Cortez, brilliance often frightens those who don't expect it. Remember that." Then he turned and left. 2 days later, the storm broke. During his evening shift, Raphael entered the staff lounge to refill supplies and froze. His photo, grainy, pulled from security footage, was printed on a notice board under the headline, "Langford's Janitor Genius, True or Publicity Stunt?" Teachers stood nearby, murmuring, "It's just ridiculous. Do you think it's true? He's mopping floors at night and solving equations by day? Nonsense." Raphael quietly tore the page down and left without a word. That night, when he reached the lab, Mina immediately saw the anger in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked. He tossed the crumpled paper onto the table. "They're laughing at me." She read it, frowning. "They're threatened. That's all." "No, they're right to laugh," he said bitterly. "I'm pretending to belong in a world that already decided I don't." Mina stood, her voice sharp. "You listen to me, Raphael Cortez. The only world that matters is the one you build for yourself and for your daughter. You think Sophia would want you to quit because some people can't see past your uniform?
He fell silent. The mention of Sophia steadied him, like gravity. Mina softened. They'll see eventually. Just make sure what they see is undeniable. He nodded slowly. Then let's finish this. The conference came on a cold morning in late February. The event hall gleamed, white lights, tall banners, a sea of suits. Langford's team sat near the front row. Raphael waited behind the stage, hands trembling, a small badge clipped awkwardly to his shirt. Raphael Cortez, research assistant, Billionaire Institute. Through the curtain he could hear Mina's opening words. Innovation is often found in unexpected places. When she called him forward, the room fell to a hush. He stepped onto the stage under 1,000 eyes. The spotlight was warm, almost blinding. For a second he froze, the janitor inside him whispering that this was madness. Then he remembered Sophia's laughter, her small hand tracing equations on the apartment floor. He remembered the long nights with chalk dust on his fingers, the quiet pride in solving what others ignored. And he began to speak. At first his voice trembled, then it steadied. He explained their model, how energy systems could adapt dynamically, how simple recalibrations could change entire buildings. He spoke not like an academic, but like a craftsman describing the beauty of his tools. When he finished, silence filled the hall. Then applause, long, sincere, rising like a wave. Mina's eyes shone with pride. Langford, seated near the front, nodded once, deeply, approvingly. For the first time, Raphael didn't look down. He let himself stand in the light. But that night, when he returned home, something was wrong. The apartment was too quiet. The neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, met him at the door, face pale. "Rafa," she said softly, "Sophia wasn't feeling well. She's at the hospital." The world tilted. He didn't remember how he got there, just the rush of streetlights, the echo of his heartbeat, the sterile white of emergency hallways. When he reached her room, she was asleep, pale, but breathing, machines humming softly. The doctor met him outside. She's stable, but we'll need to move up the surgery. Sooner rather than later." Raphael nodded numbly, gripping the doorway. He sat beside her through the night, holding her hand, whispering, "Hang on, my Vida. Just a little longer." And somewhere, under the fluorescent lights, the man who had just stood before hundreds realized that even genius meant nothing without the one person he loved most.
The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and rain. Outside the window, dawn broke in pale streaks, but Raphael's world felt trapped between two heartbeats, one his own, the other Sophia's, steady but weak under the rhythm of the monitors. He hadn't slept. The chair beside her bed had molded to his shape. His fingers had never left her small, cool hand. Every beep of the machine seemed like a question only he could not answer. When Mina arrived mid-morning, she brought coffee and quiet strength. "Any change?" He shook his head. "They said the surgery can't wait, but they also said the insurance approval hasn't cleared." His voice cracked. "I don't have the rest yet." Mina set the cup down. "How much?" "Too much." She hesitated. "Raphael, Langford could help. You know that." He looked at her sharply. "I don't want pity money." "It wouldn't be pity," she said softly. "It would be faith. The same faith he's already shown in you." But Raphael couldn't bring himself to ask. He'd spent years fighting to stand on his own. Begging now felt like erasing everything he'd just earned. "Let me talk to him," Mina said gently. "Please." He didn't stop her. At Bellmere, Edward Langford listened quietly as Mina explained. He didn't interrupt once. When she finished, he simply nodded, his gaze distant. "I knew about the surgery. I didn't know how soon." "What will you do?" Mina asked. Langford turned to the window, watching the gray sky shift over the city. "I built this school to recognize potential," he murmured. "But sometimes potential is a person, not an equation." He picked up his phone. "Prepare the paperwork," he told his assistant. "The foundation will cover the full cost, immediately." When Mina started to thank him, he shook his head.
Don't tell him yet. I want him to hear it from me." That evening, Raphael sat by Sophia's bed, telling her stories, old fairy tales he remembered from his childhood in Veracruz. Her eyelids fluttered at the sound of his voice, but she didn't wake. When a knock came at the door, he expected a nurse. Instead, Langford entered quietly, holding his hat in both hands. He looked older in the hospital's harsh light, less a billionaire, more a father who understood loss. "Mr. Cortez?" he said softly. "How is she?" "Stable, but we don't know for how long." "I know," Langford nodded. "I've already spoken to the surgeon and the finance department. The procedure will happen tomorrow morning." "What? But Langford raised a hand. "It's taken care of. The Billionaire Foundation will cover all costs. Immediately." When Raphael started to thank him, he shook his head. "Don't tell him yet. I want him to hear it from me." That evening, Raphael sat by Sophia's bed, telling her stories, old fairy tales he remembered from his childhood in Veracruz. Her eyelids fluttered at the sound of his voice, but she didn't wake. When a knock came at the door, he expected a nurse. Instead, Langford entered quietly, holding his hat in both hands. He looked older in the hospital's harsh light, less a billionaire, more a father who understood loss. "Mr. Cortez? How is she?" "Stable, but we don't know for how long." "I know," Langford nodded. "I've already spoken to the surgeon and the finance department. The procedure will happen tomorrow morning." "What? But Langford raised a hand. "It's taken care of. The Billionaire Foundation will cover all costs. Immediately." When Raphael started to thank him, he shook his head. "No, sir, I can't accept that." "Yes, you can," Langford said firmly. "Because this isn't charity. It's recognition. You gave this academy something it didn't know it needed, a reminder that brilliance doesn't come with titles." He looked toward Sophia, his voice softening. "Let her have her chance. And when she's well, you'll have yours." Raphael bowed his head, emotion breaking through his composure. "Thank you. From my whole heart, thank you." Langford smiled faintly. "Thank me by continuing to build what we've started. Mathematics can wait. Fatherhood cannot." The next morning felt like forever, compressed into an hour. Nurses moved efficiently. Doctors briefed him with practiced calm. Raphael kissed Sophia's forehead as they wheeled her towards the surgical doors. "Papa's right here. Always right here." Then she was gone behind the white doors, and silence swallowed everything. He sat in the waiting room, hands clasped so tightly they hurt. Mina arrived not long after, carrying tea and quiet prayers. "She's strong. So are you." They waited together. Hours stretched, collapsed, reformed. Time became a heartbeat, a drip, a hope. At last, the surgeon appeared. His mask hung loose and his eyes, tired but kind, told the story before he spoke. "Well, she did beautifully. The operation was successful." Raphael's breath left him in a single, shaking sob. He covered his face with both hands, his shoulders trembling. Mina's hand found his, grounding him back to the earth. "You did it. You got her here." "No," he said through tears. "We did."
When Sophia finally woke, the first thing she saw was her father's face, tear-streaked and smiling. "Hey, mija," he said, voice thick. "You scared me." She blinked, groggy. "Did it work?" "It worked," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." She tried to smile. "Then you can stop working so much." He laughed gently, brushing her hair back. "Maybe I'll just work on smarter things." A month later, spring touched the city. Sophia recovered quickly, her color returning, her laughter brighter. Raphael returned to Bellmere part-time, no longer the invisible man who pushed a mop. Langford made it official. Raphael Cortez, Research Associate, Bellmere Innovation Wing. His name appeared beside Mina's on the project that soon won national recognition. The janitor had become a mentor, his story whispered through the school like legend. Students greeted him in hallways. Teachers who once looked through him now looked up to him. But the one person whose opinion mattered most was waiting at home. Every evening Raphael came back to their small apartment, now filled with warmth instead of worry. Sophia, stronger now, would sit by the window with her math book open, challenging him to solve problems she'd copied from her lessons. One night she looked up from her notes. "Papa, when I grow up, can I work with you and Miss Mina?" He smiled, kneeling beside her. "Only if you promise to be the smarter one." She grinned. "Deal." They watched the sunset together, golden light spilling through the curtains, soft and endless. Weeks later, Langford called them both to his office, Raphael and Mina, to celebrate the final approval of their project's patent. As they left the building afterward, Mina paused beneath the blooming cherry trees that lined the academy courtyard. "You know, I used to think equations were just about finding balance, but watching you with Sophia, I think they're about connection too." He smiled. "Every problem has a heart. You just have to find it." She looked at him for a long moment. "You already have." Raphael didn't reply, but in that shared stillness, between spring blossoms and quiet gratitude, something gentle and unspoken passed between them. Not romance in the way stories often told it, but something deeper, mutual respect, care, and quiet love born of resilience. Later that evening, back in room 3B, the one where it all began, Raphael stood before the chalkboard. The janitor's mop leaned against the wall, long retired. He picked up a piece of chalk, wrote 3 words, and smiled. "For Sophia, always." Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets, the late sunlight casting his shadow across the polished floor. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was proof that genius can bloom anywhere, that love can rewrite destiny, and that sometimes the most beautiful equations are the ones solved by the heart. When Sophia finally woke, the first thing she saw was her father's face, tear-streaked and smiling. "Hey, mija," he said, voice thick. "You scared me." She blinked, groggy. "Did it work?" "It worked," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." She tried to smile. "Then you can stop working so much." He laughed gently, brushing her hair back. "Maybe I'll just work on smarter things." A month later, spring touched the city. Sophia recovered quickly, her color returning, her laughter brighter. Raphael returned to Bellmere part-time, no longer the invisible man who pushed a mop. Langford made it official. Raphael Cortez, Research Associate, Bellmere Innovation Wing. His name appeared beside Mina's on the project that soon won national recognition. The janitor had become a mentor, his story whispered through the school like legend. Students greeted him in hallways. Teachers who once looked through him now looked up to him. But the one person whose opinion mattered most was waiting at home. Every evening Raphael came back to their small apartment, now filled with warmth instead of worry. Sophia, stronger now, would sit by the window with her math book open, challenging him to solve problems she'd copied from her lessons. One night she looked up from her notes. "Papa, when I grow up, can I work with you and Miss Mina?" He smiled, kneeling beside her. "Only if you promise to be the smarter one." She grinned. "Deal." They watched the sunset together, golden light spilling through the curtains, soft and endless. Weeks later, Langford called them both to his office, Raphael and Mina, to celebrate the final approval of their project's patent. As they left the building afterward, Mina paused beneath the blooming cherry trees that lined the academy courtyard. You know, I used to think equations were just about finding balance, but watching you with Sophia, I think they're about connection too. He smiled. Every problem has a heart. You just have to find it. She looked at him for a long moment. You already have. Raphael didn't reply, but in that shared stillness, between spring blossoms and quiet gratitude, something gentle and unspoken passed between them. Not romance in the way stories often told it, but something deeper, mutual respect, care, and quiet love born of resilience. Later that evening, back in room 3B, the one where it all began, Raphael stood before the chalkboard. The janitor's mop leaned against the wall, long retired. He picked up a piece of chalk, wrote 3 words, and smiled. For Sophia, always. Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets, the late sunlight casting his shadow across the polished floor. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was proof that genius can bloom anywhere, that love can rewrite destiny, and that sometimes the most beautiful equations are the ones solved by the heart.